Hello and welcome to Twin Talk. I'm Angie and I'm here with my sister Joy. And today we are so excited because we are bringing you yet another great episode. But this episode is extra special, right, Joy?
Yes, it is.
Why is that?
Because,
drum roll,
it is our 100th episode.
Yes, so we have been making a very big deal about this on Facebook, but no one else seems to care because we actually put on Facebook a little challenge and we said, if you can guess our 100th episode, what book we're going to be doing, we are going to give you $100 and a copy of the book. Well, we had a couple of guesses, which was great, and I appreciate Bryson and Corby guessing those. Unfortunately, they were wrong. One of the guesses was Old Yeller, and one of the guesses was If I Did It by O.J. Simpson, which obviously we're not picking that book for our 100th episode. So I guess without any further ado, our book for today is Gone with the Wind.
Na, 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 na.
Oh, we should have had the music from Tara.
Na, 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 na.
And anybody that knows us well, that would have been a very easy guess. Especially if my sisters had gone on and tried to guess it, they would have guessed it no problem. But they didn't. So, oh well, Joy, I guess we're $100 not richer, but at least we're not $100 poorer.
Yeah, that's true.
Maybe we can do this again in the future on our 200th episode.
Yes.
So, okay, so you may be wondering, why Gone with the Wind? Why did you pick that book? Well, we have a long history, a long love affair with the book, and we used to watch the movie every year with our family. And so back in the day, movies, especially epic movies like Gone with the Wind, they would come on once a year?
Yes.
They would come on once a year, and we would all say, oh, Gone with the Wind's coming on, and we would plan our evening around it to watch it. We would all be there, and we maybe make some popcorn or something, and we would all sit and watch Gone with the Wind. And we loved the movie so much that the dialogue even became part. I mean, even to this day, if we are all sitting around playing cards or doing something with my family and someone gets upset, like Jeannie, she'll say fiddle-dee-dee or something, and every once in a while someone will say Atlanta, or what else, Joy?
Oh, yeah, you're waiting on it. You'll be sitting there waiting on him just like a spider.
Yeah, and anytime our land comes up, because we all own a little bit of land, we'll say Tara. We all refer to our land as Tara.
Yes, we refer to our land as Tara.
So, but I think our favorite one is every time we get excited, Jeannie or somebody will say, the Virginia Reel, and then we'll all go, oh, because that's a really funny scene in Gone with the Wind, or we think it's funny. So we also, I'm a little embarrassed to admit this, but I own a lot of Gone with the Wind merchandise. So, I kind of used to make fun of people who, did collector's plates and stuff.
Right.
But I actually have a lot of, I asked, when Corby and I first got married, Corby knew my love of Gone with the Wind, and he bought me, an entire series of, and guess what? Some of them are still displayed up on the top of a hutch I have in my kitchen.
Right. And our mother also has Gone with the Wind collector's plates.
She has collector's plates. We have ornaments. We have calendars. Joy, tell them what is in my bathroom.
Oh, Angie has a Gone with the Wind movie poster in her bathroom.
Yes, and that was from my friend Faith back in high school.
I didn't know she got you that.
She bought that for me as a senior in high school. And to this day, Faith, I doubt you'll ever listen to this, but I still have your poster. I still love it, and it's in my bathroom. Okay, let's move on. We now have confessed shamelessly that we are Gone with the Wind merchandise junkies. Joy, this is going to sound like a dumb question, but have you actually read the book?
So, no. I mean, I listened to it on Audible, but I have not read the physical book. And I really didn't even want to listen to it because I thought I knew how long it was and how time-consuming it was going to be. But you just went on and on about the book, so finally you convinced me to read the book or listen to the book, and I'm glad I did.
Well, there's a reason Joy was reluctant to read it. It's because it's 1,037 pages. If you look at the book in person, it looks like a dictionary. It's so thick. I will admit, so I read the book once, probably, I'm going to guess 10 years or more ago, and I was really shocked at how different it's quite a few differences from the movie. It's funny because the movie is spot on in so many areas, even the opening scene and stuff. And I wish we could do another episode just on the movie. Mm-hmm. But there's also some very big differences from the book and the movie. So I have read the book twice now, and I've listened to it on audio twice, so I can honestly say I know the book fairly well. But here's what's funny, Joy.
Share how long the book is on Audible.
On Audible, it is 49 hours long. That's a lot of time investment. But here's what's weird. You know how like people say they've read through the Bible? But can you honestly say you know the Bible?
No.
No. So that's how I feel with Gone with the Wind. I know it very well, but I could read it again and still see stuff that I don't remember from before. It is 49 hours long. It took me a month to listen to it on Audible during my downtime or spare time. I'm going to read the Audible introduction because I thought it was really good. Gone with the Wind is the greatest love story of our time, the story of Scarlett O'Hara and Rhett Butler. Margaret Mitchell's monumental epic of the South won a Pulitzer Prize and gave rise to one of the most popular motion pictures of all time. It is one of the most popular books ever written. More than 28 million copies of the book have been sold in more than 37 countries. Today, more than half a century after its initial publication, its achievements are unparalleled, and it remains the most revered American saga and the most beloved word by any American writer. And I will mention just quickly that you can get a free copy of Gone with the Wind. You can download it on your computer. It's under the Gone with the Wind archives. And you can get that download for free, which is pretty cool.
Okay, and before I get started on the summary, we are in my classroom, and the band is having practice on the practice field, which isn't too far from my classroom, and the windows are open. So if you hear random drums and horns, that's the band.
I wish they'd play Dixie.
That would be so cool.
Yeah.
All right, here's the summary. Gone with the Wind is a story about Scarlett O'Hara, a spoiled Southern belle who must adapt to life in the American South during and after the Civil War. Ostracized for her selfishness, she uses her cunning and resilience to survive poverty and protect her family's plantation, Tara, all while being obsessed with the Honorable Ashley Wilkes. She eventually marries the charismatic blockade runner, Rhett Butler, but their turbulent relationship and Scarlett's ultimate realization that she was in love with Rhett, not Ashley, form the central emotional arc of the story.
So, Joy, what do you think about the book? Do you think it deserves all this accolades and fanfare? Do you think it's hyped up?
I think so. I don't think it's hyped up at all because, so after this podcast, we are going to do one called The Road to Tara about Margaret Mitchell's life. And we'll get into a lot of this a lot more. But she didn't have the internet. She didn't have, a smartphone back then. And she did so much research on this book. And she was very meticulous with her research. And she was terrified of writing about the battles, she said, because she didn't want to get anything wrong or she didn't want any Southerners being mad at her.
Oh, that's true. She really did care what the Southerners thought of her.
So much research went into this book. Then I don't think there was anything like it in that time period. And so I think it deserves all the accolades that it received.
Okay, so I personally agree the book deserves all the praise that's been lavished upon it. And so after I read it the second time, remember that second time's always key, I began to really admire and appreciate how Margaret Mitchell, how she interwove so many pieces together. And I kind of think of it as this big, beautiful quilt.
Yes.
And there's just all these pieces that come together, and it just forms this one beautiful masterpiece.
Yes, it's such an epic story, and the fact that she was able to tie it all in together. And to me, the mark of a great book are characters that you can never forget.
Right.
How could you ever forget Rhett and Scarlett and Melanie and Ashley and Prissy and Mammy? And you can't. They were written so well, you can't ever forget them.
They all feel like they could have been real people in my mind.
And they were based on real people to an extent.
Joy and I, as always, were like, how are we going to do this justice, So I just kind of picked some things to focus on, and I picked 6 things. And what they are, the first of all was the plot. The storyline was interesting and entertaining. I don't know about you, Joy, but I never got bored.
No.
Was there ever a part of the book that you got bored?
No. She did a good job of just just keeping your attention.
Yes. I mean, I don't care whether she was talking about a battle, whether it was a personal scene between somebody, or whether she was talking about the government. It didn't matter. It was interesting to me. The second thing I thought was cool was the timeline, or impressive, I should say. So the timeline spans pre-Civil War, so it literally starts right before the Civil War breaks out, and it goes all the way to the Reconstruction period. So you think about that, just having a book that spans that time period, that's a lot in itself. And then the next thing I mentioned is the historical data. And Joy's already kind of talked about this, but I thought, no wonder it took her so long to write this book, because the historical information in this book is mind-boggling. Do you have anything you want to say about that?
No, it was, when you think about how she did not have access.
Oh, that's what you meant when you were saying.
Yeah,
that she didn't have
smartphones
resources
or internet.
Okay.
She's literally going to courthouses and spending
And
countless
libraries.
hours. And she went to courthouses and libraries. Like I said, we'll get more into this in our next episode. But she spent, I can't remember, hundreds of hours doing research in courthouses and libraries.
Okay. I don't know why when you said that, I was kind of thinking, what do you mean? But now I get what you're saying. Okay, and the next thing was just the writing, of course. Her writing is beautiful. Her descriptions of people, places. She talks about clothes. The way their speech. She talks about food. Anything Southern. So everything Southern flowed effortlessly. Of course, she grew up in the South, and she brings us to another place in time. She brought us to the Civil War. And we are going to read several passages during this podcast to give a good sample of this, because I think a great book like this, you just need to hear it for yourself. If you haven't read this, I want the listener, to experience what some of her writing is like. Okay, and then the next thing was, Joy's already mentioned this, but memorable characters. So she has this uncanny ability to flesh out her characters. Of course, when a book's over 1,000 pages, you've got plenty of time to do that, right?
Right.
Yeah, so, and then the number of characters in this book is impressive. And here's what, I got to thinking about this, and I thought, wow, she had characters, but let's just take, for example, Scarlett, one of the main characters. She goes into Scarlett's family genealogy, even to the second and third generation. She explains multiple generations, and and then these people, they're related to them, and they're related to them, and their cousins, this and that, and then so by the time it's all said and done, you feel like you're reading about a real family, a real community. It gives you this sense of time. It really creates this great sense of time and of history and community, and I don't know. I just, that impressed me for whatever reason. And then, I don't know why I did this, but some of the names, the old Southern names she used, was like Cade and Calvert. Or Cade Calvert was one of the characters, and Rafe. Well, my son's name is Cade. And I thought, that is so cool that I named my son that he has a name.
I did notice that there was a Cade in the book.
Yes, and I thought, oh, that is so cool, because it's such an old name.
I never would have dreamed that was an old Southern name.
I know, and I thought that's so cool, because I love old Southern things, and to know that I unwittingly named him Cade. Yes. And I love the name Rafe, too. I just think they're cool. And then the last thing that I mentioned that really stood out to me about the book was she has this really a talent at using tension and suspense throughout the book. So how like you can create a scene and you can just build all this tension until you hit the climax. And like the passage that stood out to me, and I could not find it, and I wanted to read it, but I couldn't find it, was when the Yankees were getting ready to invade Atlanta, and she's in her mind, she's talking, and she's like, with every heartbeat, she's going, Yankees are coming. And then like she hears something explode, the Yankees are coming. And by the time it's all said and done, she has got you so tense and built up. She's really good at that.
There's this tension, because at the beginning of the book, they're talking about war. And then we have the war actually hit. And then after the war, they're facing literally starvation, and what do they call the men who went, not the carpetbaggers, but basically just stragglers who would come by and try to steal and beg for food. So through the whole book, there's hardship and tension, because there's always an element of danger involved, I feel like.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. All right. So, Joy, is there anything that stood out to you that you want to discuss before we read our favorite passages?
I think the thing that stood out the most to me, and especially after reading Road to Terra, was how much a lot of the characters paralleled actual characters in her own life. And once again, y'all need to listen to our next podcast, because it's about Margaret Mitchell's life. It's called Road to Terra, and we're going to get into depth then. But so many of these characters aren't just plucked out of nowhere. They are based on people she actually knew and loved.
So one thing that stood out to me was that really, like, I don't know, I mean, even to this day, I'm just kind of surprised, but all through the book, after the Civil War's over, She talks about how the Northerners treated the Southerners during Reconstruction. And I kept wanting to fact check. Every time I'd read something, I'd be thinking, that can't be true.
Right.
There's no way that they did this or they did that. And I kept wanting to fact check all these things that were going on, especially during the Reconstruction period. And so I want to read this passage just to kind of give you an example of what I'm talking about. The Yankees had the South prostrate, and they intended to keep it so. The South had been tilted as by a giant malicious hand, and those who had once ruled were now more helpless than their former slaves had ever been. Georgia was heavily garrisoned with troops, and Atlanta had more than its share. The commandants of the Yankee troops in the various cities had complete power, even the power of life and death over the civilian population, and they used that power. They could and did imprison citizens for any cause or no cause, seize their property, hang them. They could and did harass and hamstring them with conflicting regulations about the operation of their business, the wages they must pay their servants, what they should say in public and private utterances, and what they should write in newspapers. They regulated how, when, and where they must dump their garbage, and they decided what songs the daughters and wives of ex-Confederates could sing, so that the singing of Dixie or Bonnie Blue Flag became an offense only a little less serious than treason. The jails were full of prominent citizens, and there they stayed without hope of early trial. And so many did get arrested. Many men, thinking soberly of General Lee's words and example, wished to take the oath, become citizens again, and forget the past. But they were not permitted to take it. Others, who were permitted to take the oath, hotly refused to do so, scorning to swear allegiance to a government which was deliberately subjecting them to cruelty and humiliation. Scarlett heard over and over until she could have screamed at the repetition. I'd have taken their damned oath right after the surrender if they'd acted decent. I can be restored to the Union, but by God, I can't be reconstructed into it. So were you thinking the same thing I was about?
Yeah, I hadn't I
actions?
don't know that I ever had thoughts about it. I never thought about how did the winners treat the losers, basically. How did the North treat the South? And I can believe it.
Yeah, I mean, they're really, a lot of the methods they were using are kind of methods that are being used today in politics. It's really surprising. Like, so anybody that had been in any prominent position, Southerner, before the war, let's just say you were a lawyer or a doctor, were not allowed to vote. Okay, guess who was allowed to vote? All the free black people.
They were basically promising them money and land and education for their vote.
For their vote, yeah.
And that's going on to this day.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about that surprised me was the character of Melanie. So I used to think that Scarlett was the heroine, and she is. She's one of the main characters of the book. But I read this long article, so I don't even remember where I read it, and they were talking in this article about how really and truly Melanie is the main character and the heart of the book. And I kept thinking, what? No, she's not.
I feel like she started out with Scarlett being the heroine and the main character, but then somehow Melanie snuck in and took over.
Oh, that could be.
With her character and
angelic
qualities, yeah.
So during my second reading of the book, I thought, okay, I'm going to pay more attention to Melanie and her character. And I thought, okay, I see where this person is going now, and now I totally agree. And I do feel like Mitchell's portrayal of her, and you said angelic qualities, I put all her noble qualities, were a direct representation of Mitchell's idea of what the South was like before the war. So I feel like Melanie,
or what a true Christian woman should look like.
Well, yeah, but the point I'm trying to make is that I feel like Melanie was a representation of how she looked at the South.
Yes.
Like she looked at the South as this noble, pure, beautiful, loving thing. Does that make sense?
Yes,
yeah.
it does.
Okay, so I am going to read this passage about Melanie just to prove that point and to kind of let the listeners know like how Melanie was looked at in the book. The little house was always full of company. Melanie had been a favorite even as a child, and the town flocked to welcome her home again. Everyone brought presents for the house, bric-a-brac, pictures, a silver spoon or two, linen pillowcases, small articles they had saved from Sherman and treasured, but which now they swore were of no earthly use to them. Old men who had campaigned in Mexico with her father came to see her, bringing visitors to meet old Colonel Hamilton's sweet daughter. Her mother's old friends clustered about her, for Melanie Melanie had a respectful deference to her elders that was very soothing to dowagers in these wild days when young people seemed to have forgotten all their manners. Her contemporaries, the young wives, mothers, and widows, loved her because she had suffered what they had suffered, had not become embittered, and always lent them a sympathetic ear. The young people came, as young people always come, simply because they had a good time at her home. Around Melanie's tactful and self-effacing person, there rapidly grew a clique of young and old who represented what was left of the best of Atlanta's antebellum society, all poor in purse, all proud in family, diehards of the stoutest variety. It was as if Atlanta society, scattered and wrecked by war, depleted by death, bewildered by change, had found in her an unyielding nucleus about which it could reform. Melanie was young, but she had in her all the qualities that embattled remnant, prized poverty and pride in poverty, uncomplaining courage, gaiety, hospitality, kindness, and above all, loyalty to the old traditions. Under her roof, the old days seemed to come back again, and people took heart and felt even more contemptuous of the tide of wild life, turn the page, and high living that was sweeping the carpetbaggers and newly rich Republicans along. She was, as the dowagers said, such an excellent and wholesome example to the young girls of the town. And because she made no parade of her virtues, the young girls did not resent her. It never occurred to Melanie that she was becoming the leader of a new society. And that was paraphrased, I should say. It was actually a much longer passage.
Mm-hmm.
Anything you want to say about Melanie before we move on?
No, I think you're right. I think she symbolized what Scarlett saw as the South and what
Mitchell.
Mitchell.
Mm-hmm.
And just what a true virtuous Christian woman of the South would look and act like.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and the other thing that really surprised me during my second reading, once again, it kind of reminds me of Wuthering Heights. I never really thought of Kathy and Heathcliff as being horrible people until I went back and read it. And now I went back and read Gone with the Wind. I'm like, Scarlett and Rhett were horrible people.
They were made for each other.
They were made for each other.
They were both rotten, and they were made for each other.
Yeah, so, and I just see examples, if people are listening and they're going, they weren't that bad, well, this is just a couple examples. Well, Rhett, he was like a blockade runner, and he would hold cargo that people desperately needed, and he would wait until they needed it so badly they would pay whatever it took to get it, and he would
extortion.
Get yes, and then so they said he would bring in all these luxury items on his boats, but the things that they needed, like food, clothes, medicine, they couldn't get it. So he was more interested in making money than getting people, things they needed to live. And then he was also accused of killing a black guy who was uppity to a white lady. And he also admitted to killing a Yankee cavalryman after having words in a barroom. And he didn't get caught. He wasn't charged, but he said there's someone else somewhere that probably got blamed for it. And then Scarlett, we could spend all day talking about how conniving and selfish she was. So we are going to read this passage. This is the passage where Scarlett steals her sister Sue Ellen's bow. So this is in chapter 35. This is Scarlett talking to Frank Kennedy, and he's inquiring about Scarlett's sister Sue Ellen because he's going to marry her, so he wants to know how she's doing. And this is Scarlett talking to him. But Miss Scarlett, you must remember this. When Miss Sue Ellen and I are married, there'll always be a place for you under our roof, and for Wade Hampton too. Now was the time. Surely the saints and angels watched over her to give her such a heaven-sent opportunity. She managed to look very startled and embarrassed, and opened her mouth as if to speak quickly, and then shut it with a pop. Don't tell me you didn't know I was to be your brother-in-law this spring, he said with nervous jocularity, and then seeing her eyes fill up with tears, he questioned in alarm. What's the matter? Miss Sue's not ill, is she? Oh, no, there is something wrong. You must tell me. Oh, I can't. I didn't know. I thought surely she must have written you. Oh, how mean. Miss Scarlett, what is it? Oh, Frank, I didn't mean to let it out, but I thought of course you knew that she had written you. Written me what? He was trembling. Oh, to do this to a fine man like you. What's she done? Didn't she write you? Oh, I guess she was too ashamed to write you. She should be ashamed. Oh, to have such a mean sister. By this time, Frank could not even get questions to his lips. He sat staring at her, gray-faced, the reins slack in his hands. She's going to marry Tony Fontaine next month. Oh, I'm so sorry, Frank. So sorry to be the one to tell you. She just got tired of waiting, and she was afraid she'd be an old maid. Scarlett leaned close to Frank and whispered, "Do come to supper tonight. We are so lonesome. And we're going to the wedding afterward. Be our escort. And please don't say anything to Aunt Pitty about Sue Ellen. It would distress her so much, and I can't bear for her to know that my sister—" "Oh, I won't," Frank said hastily, wincing from the very thought. "You've been so sweet to me today and done so much good. I feel right brave again." She squeezed his hand in parting and turned the full battery of her eyes upon him. So there's a pretty good example of Scarlett. She knew Frank had money, and she knew he had a store. It was doing well, and she thought, it's better for me to marry him and have his money to support my family. I don't care that my sister's in love with him and supposed to marry him.
Yeah, and she's like, and Frank and Sue Ellen are such good people. They'll probably just give it all away anyway. In other words, they don't know how to handle the money, but I do.
Exactly. Okay, so we are going to mention that there is some controversy about the book even to this day, and I got upset because here, I guess it was about a year ago, there were certain stations that refused to air Gone with the Wind on TV because of the controversy, and the primary point of contention is the film's romanticizing of the antebellum South. They say it whitewashes the horrors of slavery. People think the film represents the region's pre-Civil War era as a utopia of tranquil living, and they think it portrays the Northerners as these interlopers that are trying to disrupt a way of life. Well, just all I have to say about this is that I personally, just me, feel like Mitchell portrayed the book from the perspective of a Southerner. She's a Southerner. She's living in the South. Of course she's going to portray it from that perspective. If a Northerner had written it, it'd be written totally different. It'd be from the perspective of a Northerner. And I will say this. She portrayed blacks and whites in positive and negative ways. And I have some examples here. So do you remember the Slatteries? They were poor white trash. She talks in the book, they are talked horribly about, and they're white. They were even ranked below Negroes. Okay, Pork was black. He was the family butler. Guess who loved Pork? Scarlett. She thought more of him than she thought of her sisters. And then there was Miss Pitty Pat, the ditzy aunt. They talked about her like she was just this total moron idiot. She's white. Prissy is the little slave girl who was actually really stupid. And one of my favorite lines in the book, I don't know why, I just thought it was so funny. Rhett tells her to try not to be so stupid at one point, and she goes, "Yes, sir." I don't know why, it was just funny to me. But anyway, my point is this. Her characters are equally flawed. It doesn't matter whether you're black or white. She simply portrayed everyone as human. Now, I know that to me,
it's interesting to get a Southerner's perspective on it. You know, I wish someone from the North had written a book about this time and done all the research. I would have loved to seen the Northern's perspective and the Southern's perspective, but of course you're going to write it from your own life experiences.
Right. Now, and I understand. So the controversy really, I don't guess it really lies in the fact, I mean, people do say it's racist. Like, because in her book, she does make it sound like the slaves all liked working for the O'Haras and they would rather be there than be free.
Yes.
And I will say, in the book, they talk about how a lot of the black people felt lost after the war because they had nowhere to go, and they did want to go back home because that's all they knew.
That's all they knew.
That's all they knew, yeah. So, anything else you want to say about the controversy?
No.
Okay. All right, we can get past that then. All right, so now we are going to read some of our favorite passages. And Joy, I picked a passage out for Joy to read because I think it's really funny. And so this is about how there's these two different associations in Atlanta that have been formed, and they get in a fight because some of the women want to pull weeds off of Yankee graves, and some women don't.
Right.
So, Joy, go ahead and you can read that.
Okay. Melanie had also been made secretary for both the Association for the Beautification of the Graves of Our Glorious Dead and the Sewing Circle for the Widows and Orphans of the Confederacy. This new honor came to her after an exciting joint meeting of those societies which threatened to end in violence and the severance of lifelong ties of friendship. The question had arisen at the meeting as to whether or not weeds should be removed from the graves of the Union soldiers near those of Confederate soldiers. The appearance of the scraggly Yankee mounds defeated all the efforts of the ladies to beautify those of their own dead. Immediately the fires which smoldered beneath tight basks flamed wildly, and the two organizations split up and glared loftily. The sewing circle was in favor of the removal of the weeds. The ladies of the beautification were violently opposed. Mrs. Meade expressed the views of the latter group when she said, "Dig up the weeds off Yankee graves. For 2 cents I'd dig up all the Yankees and throw them in the city dump." At these ringing words, the two associations arose, and every lady spoke her mind, and no one listened. The meeting was being held in Mrs. Merriweather's parlor, and Grandpa Merriweather, who had been banished to the kitchen, reported afterwards that the noise sounded just like the opening guns of the Battle of Franklin, and he added he guessed it was a dang sight safer to be present at the Battle of Franklin than at the ladies' meeting.
So I love that passage. And I will say this, that was paraphrased. That was probably another 2 paragraphs long. I had to shorten it because it was so long. That's really funny though. And I'm not kidding. If you read this book, spend some time on that part because it's hilarious.
There is a lot of humor in the book.
So the last thing I want to mention, every book there's some things in it that are hard or like down, and you would think a book about the Civil War that, you would think, what are you talking about, Angie? What is it you didn't like about the book? Well, was it reading about all the cruel war and the hardships of war? The suffering. There's so much that could bring you down, but honestly, the thing that was hardest for me to read, and most people don't realize, Scarlett had a little boy named Wade, and he was Wade Hamilton, and he was from her first marriage, and he died of pneumonia or something like that.
The father
of Wade had died. And anyway, throughout the book, Mitchell portrays Scarlett as not caring about this little boy. He's a nuisance. He's in her way, and he just is a little boy who wants to be loved, and he's loved by like Melanie and other people, but Scarlett treats him horrible. And I'm just going to read this small paragraph. Scarlett was as anxious as her mother to have Wade out of Atlanta, not only for the child's safety, but because his constant fear irritated her. Wade was terrified to speechlessness by the shelling, and even when lulls came, he clung to Scarlett's skirts, too terrified to cry. He was afraid to go to bed at night, afraid of the dark, afraid to sleep lest the Yankees should come and get him. And the sound of his soft, nervous whimpering in the night grated unendurably on her nerves. Secretly, she was just as frightened as he was, but it angered her to be reminded of it every minute by his tense, drawn face. And then another little section said, she feared to send him home, and he remained in Atlanta a frightened, silent little ghost, pattering about desperately after his mother, fearing to have her skirt out of his hand for even a minute. And then another place, forgotten in the tumult, little Wade crouched behind the banisters on the front porch, peering out onto the lawn like a caged, frightened rabbit, his eyes wide with terror, sucking his thumb and hiccuping. Once Scarlett saw him and cried sharply, "Go play in the backyard, Wade Hampton." But he was too terrified, too fascinated by the man seen before him to obey.
Yeah, I think this little boy's going to need lots of counseling in his later life. She was not a good mother to him.
No, and I think the reason it was so hard for me to read was because Mitchell, the way she described him, he sounded so real. He's exactly how a little boy would act that was living in the middle of a war. And he was terrified all the time, and he was scared, and she was basically always telling him, "Go away, you're getting on my nerves, just go play in the backyard." And so it just broke my heart. Even though he's not real, I'm sitting here just crying for this little boy who's just wanting attention, even though he's not real. So does that not, to me, that's a powerful writer that can make you feel sympathy for someone who doesn't even exist. So, okay, and then the last passage that we're going to read, which I thought was really pretty, was, Joy, you want to go ahead and set it up? It's
Yeah, this is Ashley and Scarlett are talking, and this is Ashley. Isn't this Ashley describing?
He's just reminiscing about the old days.
He's reminiscing about the old days, and it is very beautifully written. I'm glad you picked this section because, or passage because it is really, I love this passage. He slipped from the table, laughing softly in unbelief, putting his hand under her chin. He turned her face up to his. "Ah, Scarlett, what a poor liar you are. Yes, life has a glitter now, of a sort. That's what's wrong with it. The old days had no glitter, but they had a charm, a beauty, a slow-paced glamour." Her mind pulled 2 ways. She dropped her eyes. The sound of his voice, the touch of his hand were softly unlocking doors that she had locked forever. Behind those doors lay the beauty of the old days, and a sad hunger for them welled up within her. But she knew that no matter what beauty lay behind, it must remain there. No one could go forward with a load of aching memories. His hand dropped from her chin, and he took one of her hands between his two and held it gently. "Do you remember?" he said, and a warning bell in her mind rang. "Don't look back! Don't look back!" But she swiftly disregarded it, swept forward on a tide of happiness. At last she was understanding him. At last their minds had met. This moment was too precious to be lost, no matter what pain came after. "Do you remember?" he said, and under the spell of his voice the bare walls of the little office faded, and the years rolled aside, and they were riding country bridle paths together in a long-gone spring. As he spoke, his light grip lightened on her hand, and in his voice was the sad magic of old half-forgotten songs. She could hear the gay jingles of bridle bits as they rode under the dogwood trees in the Tarletons' picnic, hear her own careless laughter, see the sun glinting on his silver-gilt hair, and note the proud, easy grace with which he sat his horse. There was music in his voice, the music of fiddles and banjos to which they had danced in the white house that was no more. There was the far-off yelping of possum dogs in the dark swamp under cool autumn moons, and the smell of eggnog bowls wreathed with holly at Christmas time, and smiles on black and white faces. And old friends came trooping back, laughing as though they had not been dead these many years. Stuart and Brent with their long legs and their red hair and their practical jokes. Tom and Boyd as wild as young horses. Joe Fontaine with his hot black eyes, and Kate and Rayford Calvert, who moved with such languid grace. There was John Wilkes, too, and Gerald, red with brandy, and a whisper and a fragrance that was Ellen. I love that. Mm-hmm. A whisper and a fragrance that was Ellen. Mm-hmm. That was her mom. Over it all rested a sense of security, a knowledge that tomorrow could only bring the same happiness today had brought. His voice stopped, and they looked for a long, quiet moment into each other's eyes, and between them lay the sunny, lost youth that they had so unthinkingly shared. Without warning, tears started in her eyes and rose slowly down her cheeks, and she stood looking at him dumbly, like a hurt, bewildered child. He said no word, but took her gently in his arms, pressed her head against his shoulder, and leaning down, laid his cheek against hers. It's all gone with the wind.
Wow. I
Yeah,
mean,
that's
even
sad.
listening to that again, I'm
Oh, it's
blown
just
away
sad. Mhm.
by how she was able to pull all those emotions in the past, how she brought it to life. And I'm just blown away by her writing.
It's so nostalgic and so heartbreaking at the same time. It's just so bittersweet, I guess is the word.
Is it, while I'm thinking about it, was this a one-hit wonder? Didn't she only write Gone with the Wind?
Yes, I think she had another book she was working on, but she just never could get it to be what she wanted it to be.
So imagine.
I feel like I don't know. When we do the book Road to Terra, and I'll review my notes, but I can't remember if she ever actually published another book or not.
I do know this is the first novel she ever wrote. Can you imagine writing the first novel you ever write, and it's considered one of the best books that's ever written?
No, I can't even fathom that.
Okay, Joy, we have come to a rating word. I want you to guess, what is my rating word?
Okay, I've thought this over. I thought it could be Atlanta or Spada, or I think it's Terra.
Oh, no, it's not Terra.
It's not Terra.
Guess again, just one more guess.
Scarlett?
No.
How many Scarletts?
I just knew you was
How many
gonna...
Rhett Butlers?
Mammies. I don't know why I thought you would get this one.
How many Mammies?
No.
Prissies?
It's one of our things we love to say from the book.
Atlanta. Just like a Spada. The Virginia Reel. How many Virginia Reels?
Okay, Joy's obviously not going to get it.
Oh, no.
It's Fiddle-Dee-Dee.
Oh, my gosh.
How many Fiddle-Dee-Dees do you
goodness.
give this book?
Okay, well, obviously, I'm going to give the book of the century 5 Fiddle-Dee-Dees.
Yeah, it's not very often that Joy and I give a book of 5, but I'm going to give it 5 Fiddle-Dee-Dees as well.
It is a great American classic. It deserves 5 Fiddle-Dee-Dees.
It deserves 5 Fiddle-Dee-Dees, yeah. Matter of fact, we need to have a Twin Talk shirt made up with our 100th episode that we gave 5 Fiddle-Dee-Dees for it. So, love the book. Highly recommend it.
If you're willing to invest the time.
Yeah.
I would say that I would recommend this to people who are interested in the Civil War.
Yes.
And even though it's going to focus a lot more on people's, these fictional character stories, and not so much on the battles, it is well researched, and there's a lot of history in the book that's supposed to be factual.
If you like history, and especially like Joy just said, the Civil War, It will keep your attention. It is fascinating, and it gives it a human element to it, because you can go back in a history book and read about the Civil War, and you can buy books about it, but when you intertwine families and what they were facing and going through, it just makes it become real to you.
Yes.
I can't say enough about the book other than the fact that it is very, very long, and it did take me a month to listen to it.
But memorable.
It is very memorable. Now, will I ever read it again? No. Or listen to it again? No. I've done that 3 or 4 times now, so I'm done. But will I watch the movie again? Yeah. As a matter of fact, I'd love to do a podcast on the movie.
Yes.
Enjoy
One day, if we get time, we will do a podcast
we've never
just on the movie.
talked about just a movie, but...
And there's a lot of fascinating things about the movie. I mean, it was one of the biggest searches in history for who was going to play Scarlett O'Hara.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right. That's a whole other podcast.
I know. All right, guys. Well, thank you for joining us, and we hope that we get to do 100 more episodes,
Yes.
Lord willing. And we will see you next time on Twin Talk.